It is great to be here, recording our very first episode.
Inaugural episode,
if you will. I'm really excited because we have a lot of great stuff today to kind of go over. Why don't you start off by talking about tell us a little bit about our lists, tell everyone and kind of what we're looking at doing by kind of putting together and going through these lists.
Well, I am the critic and you are the fan. We are kind of melding together the two sides of film that seem to be this kind of dichotomy, the side of the critic and then the side of the popularity, the people.
Because nowadays we have what the critics like and usually what the populace likes. And even when we have films that should be hits on the critic side that are from the popular side, they're not, and vice versa.
Right. And I think there's a lot of podcasts, a lot of channels out there that talk about one or the other, but I don't really think there's a proper station for both. And I don't think that it really is this far off dichotomy. I think that the two really go hand in hand together, and I think that's what our podcast is all about. So along with giving out news and movie reviews of movies of this nature, I thought we would start off by showing some lists to show where we're coming from as, critics and fans of movies.
Absolutely. And I think when you all hear these lists, you'll really be able to tell. Chance and I love movies, but we really do have very different tastes.
Understatement of the year.
And there's a lot of movies that we both really, really like. I think we agree on a lot of stuff, and then there's some deep chasms.
Right.
That we could argue and have argued for hours about.
Right.
But that's part of the fun of this whole situation. But getting into that, I'm really excited for our first episode today. We are going to be we want to do something kind of broad. So we are going to talk about our favorite directors, just to kind of give you all a little idea of who we are. We were kind of looking, did we want to do a top 5? Do we want to do a top 10? But we actually came to a really remarkable number.
Well, 7's got ancient and deep roots in, pretty much all of human culture.
Yes.
But it basically just boils down to it's not too many and it's not too few. 5 you can count on one hand. 10 you need a pen and paper. So 7 I think is an apt number. And, we'll kind of have these, they'll be ranked, 1 through 7. But beyond that, we'll have honorable mentions that, we wanted to make the list, but just couldn't because of, brevity's sake. So, we'll mention those two and, we'll go into a little more detail on that later.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So why don't you start off with your number 7, Chance?
All right, so my number 7 director, and this was tough. I had a real hard time trying to figure out exactly how to rank these 7 because I came out with the exact 7 that I have on my list, and it was figuring out the order that was the hard part. But after watching several movies recently by this man, it is a man, not a woman. My number 7 director is director Billy Wilder. He made movies in the 1940s, 1950s, and 60s. German descent, moved to America when he was young. His mother and father were in the film business, but they were, just extra actors, and I think his father was a set designer.
Oh, Sunset Boulevard.
Right. So anybody that doesn't know who Billy Wilder is scratching their head. Who the heck is Billy Wilder?
Yeah, I was. I immediately got on IMDb.
Famous movies like Sunset Boulevard in 1950, Some Like It Hot, Marilyn Monroe's most famous movie. Some people say, the most successful comedy ever. That was in 1959. 1960, Jack Lemmon and Shirley MacLaine in The Apartment. That made all sorts of money and awards, almost swept the Oscars in 1960. He was a big founder of the film noir genre, with Double Indemnity in 1944. That's also a really, really great film. My favorite film by Billy Wilder, however, is a little, lost film that no one ever, hears or sees, and it's called The Lost Weekend, starring Ray Milland. It was made in 1945, and it is about an alcoholic on a 3-day weekend, or a 3-day bender over a 3-day weekend.
Sounds like your type of movie.
Yeah, they don't call me the Hurricane Critic for nothing. So.
Yeah. Well, that's a good choice. It makes me feel kind of bad about my number 7. My number 7, I really fought long and hard because he has some movies that I absolutely adore and have just kind of changed the way I think about cinema and films that just really are true to my heart. And at the same time, there's other films that he's made that are just downright awful. So it was kind of one of those things where, there's just, I guess, the strength of his hits outweigh the misses in my eyes. But honestly, if his career continues the way has been going, he'll quickly fall off my list. But just for kind of nostalgia's sake, I have to say Tim Burton.
Okay. That's not a bad choice at all, and I'm surprised that he's, number 7 on your list, because, yeah, he really has put out some mediocre things lately, and he's put out some downright bad movies, like you said, and, he single-handedly made Johnny Depp who he was, and now he's almost single-handedly destroyed him.
Well, no, Johnny Depp's done that all on his own. I don't think he needed any help from Tim Burton to do that.
The beginning of the end for Johnny Depp, though, was the Charlie Chocolate Factory in Alice in Wonderland.
You're right. That is kind of where he started working towards the studios as opposed to working towards, his own kind of creative vision. Because everything before then he felt like was just a project that he had in his head for ever. Yeah. And that these were ideas that he really loved. And then it kind of got to this moment where it was like, well, what do I do next? And it's just this constant cycle of, well, what do I do next? And nothing's just overly exciting. There's no premise that he's done really in the past 10 years that has been exciting at all. I mean,
did you see his most recent Big Eyes?
No, unfortunately, I have not seen Big Eyes yet.
I haven't either, but there was nothing that looked wow worthy in any of the trailers or any of the reviews I saw.
Yeah, and this is.
It just didn't seem like a very Tim Burton movie, to be quite honest.
And see, that was another thing I was looking at. But another issue I kind of had with that is, Amy Adams, she kind of starting to bug me, and I'm not sure if I want to sit through an entire movie that is just Amy Adams.
Yeah.
Especially, with a director that I don't think has the film or directing chops that he used to have.
Right. So, do you want to mention a few of Tim Burton's great movies that you love in the mix?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. My favorite, hands down, Tim Burton movie, Big Fish. That movie is fantastic.
Absolutely. Not agree more.
It is incredible, but you have the eerie Ed Wood that is good. You have Edward Scissorhands, which of course is a little overplayed, but I still love it. Those those images of the house, the little boxes,
Right, and without that, you don't get Wes Anderson later.
No, I mean that really did kind of, what I love most about the movie isn't its dark, brooding moments. It's really colorful, bright moments. It really kind of picked apart, American society.
Look for dark and brooding, you're going to end up watching Nightmare Before Christmas or even Ed Wood.
Which is also one of my favorite movies, despite the fact he didn't direct it.
But do you want to mention maybe not just a few downright awful ones? We've already mentioned some of his Disney projects and stuff like that. But maybe some disappointing ones.
Well, Planet of the Apes, definitely.
Right.
I mean, we already said the kind of Disney ones, Alice in Wonderland and all that. Corpse Bride, I wish there had been more to it. His Batman movies really never did much for me. Most people end up, I'm a huge Batman fan. Most people, y'all will learn that about me. But, most people really like the first one a lot better than the second, and the second one's too dark and creepy. I don't know. I liked it.
Right.
I really like Danny DeVito as the Penguin. He was born to be the Penguin.
Right.
Yeah, maybe they didn't give him anything to do or it was a goofy, but just for the sheer imagery of it, it was awesome. I did love Sleepy Hollow when it comes out, and I still watch it on occasional times.
That for some reason that was on today, as well as another Sleepy Hollow rendition. And me and my dad were actually trying to figure out if it's some sort of 200th anniversary of Washington Irving or something. I don't know.
Yeah, well,
we couldn't quite figure it out. It seemed like every Sleepy Hollow thing was on some sort of random cable network station today. But
and how can we forget Beetlejuice?
Oh, of course.
And Pee-wee's Big Adventure?
Right.
I mean...
Yeah, it does seem like he's just sort of mellowed out and doesn't really know how to be weird anymore.
No, let's talk about terrible Dark Shadows, man.
Really? That bad?
Oh, man, I wanted to like it. I love vampire stuff. I love Johnny Depp. I love period 60s things.
Right.
Everything that it had going for it, I would have liked. It was just awful. And it's just...
It's a shame.
Yeah, it is a shame. I haven't seen Frankenweenie. I've heard great things. I heard it is kind of him back to what he used to be, but we'll kind of see. Anyway, you want to go on with your number 6 with us?
Yes. I'll say one word about Tim Burton.
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
Inconsistent.
Inconsistent, absolutely. He has definitely moments of brightness. Oh, I can't believe I also left out Sweeney Todd. I love Sweeney Todd. One last thing I'll say about Tim Burton is growing up, whenever I had a brief moment when I was really into photography, and that was almost entirely sparked by watching Sweeney Todd.
Triangles.
The triangles in Sweeney Todd, they took me in. I loved it. He had such great movement in every shot. It was really beautiful, and it was the first time I really stopped a movie in its track and said, wow, look at that shot.
Right.
It's just some people standing in a room, but it is so captivating.
And, I guess I didn't see Sweeney Todd till much later, but the movie that did that for me was Drive, and I know that's probably an overdone movie as far as shots and,
Well, but what a great movie.
Yeah.
As far as pacing and just the way the emotional resonance of every scene, just by the way it's shot, not by what's being said, really.
There's a great YouTube video on by every frame of painting, and he shows how Nicholas Winding Refn uses the camera to make 4 quadrants on the shot, and the quadrants kind of complement and react on each other. And so, looking at the different quadrant of the shot, broken down to 4 different squares, you can see what's going to happen by their interaction, and it's pretty interesting.
Huh.
Let me get on with our list.
Yeah, absolutely.
So my number 6, I know you figured he was on my list somewhere, and the answer is number 6. And I wanted to put him higher.
Oh my God, I can't believe you're going to do this. Number 6, really?
Right, but there's other great names on the list, and my other thing is there's a whole part of me that's just not at all, expressed by his movies, and that's Christopher Nolan.
Yeah.
God, what a filmmaker. He's become something of a little bit of a polarizing figure, but I don't know, you can just name from the start. Memento.
Oh yeah.
Batman Begins, The Prestige, Dark Knight, Inception, Interstellar.
Okay, I do gotta say, near perfect resume. Near.
Right.
There are some slight misses, especially with Interstellar. out of that group of all those things that you just said, that and Dark Knight Rises are the two. Well, I can't forgive Dark Knight Rises, but that's a conversation for another
Interstellar?
day.
Do you mean Insomnia?
I liked Insomnia.
You didn't like Interstellar, though?
I mean, I liked parts of it.
Really?
I didn't think that the whole thing kind of came together. I thought that, spoiler. Well, not really any spoiler. I thought the third act was kind of goofy.
Yeah.
And very stretched. And again, and then little things like, when he's going away to space and, Matthew McConaughey is talking to John Lithgow and he's like, John Lithgow's like, oh, yeah, your son's gonna be fine with you going and probably never coming back, but your daughter, you gotta really deal with your daughter.
Yeah.
But the son, he really doesn't matter, except for the couple times he shows up, and again, really doesn't matter.
Right.
And it's just like, this is my problem. Here's my problem with Christopher. Christopher Nolan tells, for the most part, everything I can say can be the exception, can be Dark Knight Rises, but for the most part, Christopher Nolan tells great stories. I don't think his characterizations, his character motivation, I don't think his characters are as deep as they could be. I feel like he sacrifices a lot for the story.
Right. And that's what I mean by when I say, there's a whole side of Nolan that just doesn't express me. I'm very, very character driven. When I write, when I read, when I watch movies, he never swears in any of his movies. No swear words ever. And if anybody knows me, I swear and curse like a sailor. So there are things that, like, if I somehow was to strike it big and have my $1 million screenplay, and they asked me, who do you want to direct this, I would hesitate to say Nolan because I know my F-bombs would get nixed out.
I mean, more than that though, I don't mind the F-bomb. If you want to make movies without profanity, that's your prerogative.
But I agree with that to an extent, but I think that's partly what's starting to feed into what you were saying with Interstellar and part of the Batman series where it's starting to feel a little too Spielbergy,
Well, see, that wasn't ever my problem. My problem was, especially with Dark Knight Rises, it was the opposite, actually. It was that we didn't get any of the Spielberg aspect. We didn't get any of that excitement.
We get all the Spielbergy themes. Whether or not it's carried out like Spielberg isn't really my concern, but it's that Spielbergy theme of it's got to be a serious movie that can somehow be fun and funny at the same time.
Yeah.
And that worked in some occasions. But I think he's starting to go too far, and you don't get that feel in The Dark Knight. There's never any sort of Spielberg feel about The Dark Knight. But you watch.
He doesn't do sappy well. That's the problem. He does not do sappy well.
No, he doesn't. He really doesn't. And I mean, but Interstellar, and I mean all these movies where he has big time shortcomings. It's because he's being so ambitious in some other category.
But all I'm saying is, dude, he had a great cast. He should have gotten a little bit of a better performance. I feel like you have times where you have, come on, Matthew McConaughey, and you couldn't get something a little bit more poignant without just, I don't know. His best movies to me are the ones that have very little sap, that are just grit, that are really, where like Memento, where he just steers into
right, The Prestige.
Yeah. I mean, I don't love that one as much, but yeah,
I agree. And but that said, there was some awe-inspiring moments in Interstellar, and Interstellar.
I mean, there were.
You gotta realize that the movie itself kind of mimics the journey to space, where you're going off, and for whatever reasons they're probably bullshit, because honestly there's no real other reason to go into space than you just want to explore.
Yeah.
And it had nothing to do with saving the world. It had nothing to do with Murph and all that. Maybe the movie does try and cover it up a little bit, but ultimately it's about going and exploring, and McConaughey's character does that. But exploring space isn't that riveting. For most of it, it's just pure darkness and boredom. And when you do hit something, it's going to be cold and unfeeling. And I feel like most of the movie was that cold darkness, boredom, unfeeling. And then it lends itself to this big kind of climax when you do get to the destination.
Yeah, I just thought that what they delivered was a little too far-fetched.
And it was ham-handed. But
it was. They just kind of dropped this entire huge, plot function, and it wasn't like it was ambiguous.
Right.
It wasn't like, they drop it and then it's open to your interpretation, and then that's one thing.
But that said, it's incredible how they're able. Nolan's so good at weaving different times together with science fiction sort of methods to tie in the different time periods. And you were saying that McConaughey doesn't do that much acting in the movie, and I'd like to disagree. I thought McConaughey single-handedly carried that movie.
I didn't say he's great. He's always great.
Right.
Not always great. I'll take that back.
I honestly can't imagine anybody else doing that role.
Agreed, but I feel like with a different director, he could have been better.
See, I disagree. All those shots out in space, the shot in the Tesseract, in any of those action scenes, it's not going to look as good. It's not going to be as crisp. It's not going to look as realistic.
Well, I'm not talking about the visual look of it. I mean, that's what Nolan's got that down. Nolan has ever.
But that's the thing. Every other blockbuster movie is trying to be like Nolan. They're trying to look as good as Nolan, and they end up not looking as good or being as good. And so Nolan, even we have to give him credit where credit is due. If even when he falls short on the story parts, he still has the best looking shit on.
Well, yes,
in cinema bar none.
Okay. Agreed. Agreed. Visually, he's great. He just needs to, at some point, realize if you don't have characters that everyone loves and is invested in for some reason that isn't
right.
Casual or one thing that one of my favorite directors of all time, who's going to be at the top of my list, said is I make movies for moments, not moves. I write around moments, not moves. He goes, well, okay, so you might ask, what's the difference between a moment and a move? Say for instance, the move is Evil Twin.
Right.
Evil Twin does nothing.
Right. It's the context or situation which the Evil Twin and the protagonist are going to meet.
Yeah, it's what is relatable about the Evil Twin. What is that moment that you think, wow, this is why they did Evil Twin. This is why they couldn't have had a moment that was this good without that. And he goes, I will kill a move for a second. In a second to protect a moment. And I feel like that's something that maybe no one needs to take note of and maybe dial back on his moves and, focus on those character moments.
I feel like that it's the opposite of what he needs to do. I think he's dialed too much in on the character moments, and that's why we got so much of the Spielbergian sap. I think if he, keeps going for the moves, then we get more Memento, we get more Prestige.
That's true, but because you're not good at something doesn't mean you should just scrap it.
Right,
I feel like
I also just feel like there's not much of a place for that Spielbergian nonsense anymore either. So that's just me, and that'll come up later when you list a certain other person.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We're getting ahead of ourselves. So should I just go to my number 6? Or you want to say something else?
I just want to say one last thing that we were saying that visuals, isn't really what we were talking about, but I did want to point out that Hoyt Hoytama, the cinematographer, the camera director for Interstellar, didn't even get an Academy Award nomination for Interstellar. And I thought far and away that was the best shot movie I'd seen that year, if not this decade or this century. So.
It does. It's beautiful. It is a beautiful looking film.
I just want to point out the Academy continually screws Nolan over year in, year out.
Well, and see, that's the funny thing about Nolan is he just kind of skates that line between your and I genres, you know?
Right.
Where he really wants to take the actiony, he wants to take the fan genre and make it something that critics can love and do.
Right.
But critics aren't ready to accept him at this point.
Right.
But anyway, I think definitely I think as the years go by, unlike Tim Burton, Christopher Nolan is a director who's just going to get better.
Yes. I hope so. I hope he hasn't peaked. Some people say he's peaked for that.
Well, I mean, and it is possible with Dark Knight, and then Dark Knight Rises, and then, I mean...
Yeah.
It's not if you were to put this on a line chart, it's not going in the best direction, but I do have faith that he's someone who has incredible skills, and if he gets a great script in front of him.
Cool ideas, you know, he just has downright cool ideas.
I feel like he needs someone to do a little bit more of the script writing and let him be more the idea guy.
Right, and that's used to be what his brother Jonathan did, but didn't really come out in that last one.
No, it didn't. It really didn't.
So, do you want to continue? I think we should probably be a little more brief with each.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of these are going to be a little briefer. My next one is someone who hasn't done a lot of movies yet, and he's an up-and-comer, though. James Gunn.
Okay.
And no, this is not just because Guardians of the Galaxy, but I will say I was so excited for Guardians of the Galaxy before there was an ad, before there was a trailer, for the simple reason that James Gunn was attached. Yes, he has done some crap shit, and I'm gonna live up to it, and he can, you know what I mean?
Right.
Yes, he's done some fucking weird stuff. Excuse the language. But Super is probably one of my favorite movies of all time.
Yeah, Super is a nice little indie flick. It's very, I don't know, welcoming, I guess.
In every aspect of it is so well put together, in my opinion, at least.
Right.
You have great characters. Kevin Bacon is, if you haven't seen Super, please, it's on Netflix. Go out and watch Super today. Super has Kevin Bacon as the coked out drug dealer, which is hilarious from start to finish. Can I have some of those eggs, please?
So, let me interject here. I don't want to skip ahead too much, but we will have our comic book movie list coming up at some point.
Yeah.
Does that count as a comic book movie?
It does to me. It surely does.
Okay. Was it actually based off of a graphic novel or something?
No, it's not like Kick-Ass where it was based on a graphic novel, but
fully original screenplay.
It is fully original.
Very cool. I'm fan with that.
Yeah, but and it's so weird, but Rainn Wilson's incredible. Liv Tyler's incredible it's the most shocking movie you have ever seen. Every moment is completely, and when you watch Guardians, it makes total sense that he did it. And he wrote and directed this film.
Right.
It's Gunn. This is his baby, and you can tell. Just every moment is just packed with so much love, with hilarious, anything from dirt jokes to just kind of nasty jokes to
any other films you'd like to recommend?
Well, Guardians, of course.
Other than Guardians, those the only two recommendable ones?
They're the only. Yeah, really.
Okay.
Slither, good not great. Stars Nathan Fillion, who I freaking love. You don't like Nathan Fillion, I'm pretty sure. He's a little too. I love his patented flavor of cheesiness. I love it.
Oh yeah, not a fan of Nathan Fillion at all. Generic white dudes.
But he's also in Super, but they have him as the cheesiest. They have him as this TV character of this like Jesus superhero.
That's right.
And it is just, it's priceless. It is absolutely priceless. Anyway, Super, incredible film. James Gunn. I feel like he's one of those directors that really, he has a lot of cruddy films on his resume because no one's really given him a chance.
Right.
And, so he's literally doing things to eat. I'm pretty sure.
Right.
So whenever I'm really excited with Guardians because that's such a huge hit. So I'm just excited to see what's going to come from him next. I'm expecting only greatness.
Oh yeah, it's only up from here with James Gunn. I'll be surprised if it's anywhere but up.
And that new movie he has coming out looks really good. The name is spacing me, but it stars Michael Rooker, who was in Super and Guardians. Yondu, the blue alien who lights things on his dashboard or whatever. So I'm excited because he was great in Super. Anyway, I'm excited to see what more is going to come with James Gunn. You want to go to your next one?
Absolutely. Okay, so little shift from James Gunn. Similar to my seventh choice, Billy Wilder, who I'd like to just reiterate. One of the reasons I chose Billy Wilder as one of my top 7 directors is he can make a great movie of any genre. He made a comedy with Some Like It Hot. He had super dark film noir detective story with Double Indemnity. He had a prisoner of war movie with Stalag 17. He's got the psychological film with The Lost Weekend. He's got Sunset Boulevard, which is really hard to classify with a genre. Sunset Boulevard is one of the most brilliant movies I've ever seen. So it's really just his versatility and the fact that he can just do anything. And in every one of those movies, you still watch it and say, this is a Billy Wilder movie. Despite what all the different, elements of the movie are, this for some reason feels like a Billy Wilder movie. And this next director that my number 5 director is very much like that. I mean, if not the example of it, and that is Stanley Kubrick.
Oh wow! Yeah, that's a great pick. I can't believe he's not. I can't believe he's not on my list. I think he might be on my honorable mention.
Right, and I could name pretty much every one of his movies. He didn't really make a bad movie.
Okay, but let's say one thing for the people out there, because I'm sure there's going to be the critics out there who are like Stanley Kubrick. Oh my God, he's incredible. But for the fans out there, as opposed to the critics, if you haven't seen Stanley Kubrick films, he is one of those old directors that is more than worth a watch.
Right. Ahead of his time is a good way to describe him.
Yeah, absolutely. Still one of my favorite movies of all time, Dr. Strangelove, or how I learned to stop worrying and love the bomb.
Absolutely. And going with versatility, I'm just going to go through his filmography. One of my favorite war movies ever is Paths of Glory, the only good World War I movie ever, starring Kirk Douglas. And then from there,
not true. Sorry, continue.
Hollywood World War I movie.
I'll accept it.
Yeah.
Continue.
And then 3 years later, you get Kirk Douglas in Spartacus, maybe the greatest gladiator movie ever.
Definitely.
And then he somehow made a film version of Lolita. Tagline of the movie was, "How did they make a film version of Lolita?" And then 2 years later, Dr. Strangelove.
What a film! Seriously, if you have not seen this movie, go out and watch it immediately.
And 4 years later, he goes from Dr. Strangelove, which is a weird black and white allegorical comedy that is just totally absurdist, to 1968. He makes 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is just an unbelievably over the top psychological science fiction piece that's uber serious as opposed to like the totally unserious Doctor Strangelove.
Yeah.
And then fast forward 3 more years and you get A Clockwork Orange, which is actually my least favorite Kubrick movie, and that's just because I love the book Clockwork Orange so much. And the book is not as near as mean-spirited as the Kubrick movie. The Kubrick movie is just downright mean and nasty, and it's hard to watch it and not get the feeling that you were the guy at the end with his eyes peeled open by a machine. And I guess that was part of his intention, but I just don't want to ever feel like that watching a movie.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's The Shining. Oh, my God.
Yeah, incredible.
Most symbolic movie ever.
Yeah.
And then Full Metal Jacket 7 years later, the Vietnam movie. Mm-hmm. And then Eyed Wide Shut to end it, which is probably the weirdest, most enigmatic movie ever. So, Kubrick's just a legend. Not much that I can say that, people have either seen him or not seen him. But if you haven't seen him, start with Dr. Strangelove and everything else will kind of start to make sense.
And
I'm not one of these crazy conspiracists that think that Kubrick had filmed the moon landing and that he was in the Saturnalia cult or anything. But the point is, he's that smart and that artistically capable that people are convinced that the only way he can make a movie this good is that he's some sort of cult or conspiracist,
Yeah, and I mean, I will still always say that one of the old movies that just kind of changed my outlook on going back and watching old movies was Doctor Strangelove. I mean, it was just funny from start to finish.
Right.
And I grew up on the old Pink Panther movies.
Yes, Peter Sellers, what a revelation.
And man, I grew up on Peter Sellers. I grew up loving Peter Sellers. But I never had seen Peter Sellers until I saw Doctor Strangelove.
No joke. No.
And guys, if you don't know, for those out there who haven't seen the movie, he plays the three main roles in that film.
Three of the 4 main roles.
Okay, 3 of the 4.
He actually was originally cast to be George C. Scott's character as well, but they just found that was just too darn difficult to do filming.
He was probably sucking out all his bodily fluids.
And why not get George C. Scott? And
he was great.
I don't know if you know the story behind George C. Scott, but Kubrick basically convinced him, George C. Scott thought this was all a serious movie, and that's the only way Kubrick could convince him to play the part. And so what we see in the actual film is what Kubrick convinces George C. Scott is just rehearsal takes where he wants him to act silly. And so the actual serious takes they shot and then threw away, and then kept all the funny, silly takes.
I was about to say, you couldn't, because at the beginning of the story, I was like, there's no way that you could say that the takes of him that they used were the serious takes.
No, and the thing is, he didn't know that any of this was being filmed, and the first time he saw it, George C. Scott, first time he saw it was in the film debut, and he walked out of the film screening. He was so angry.
Wow. That's a great story. It's an absolutely great story.
All right, so I will let you get on with your number 5.
Okay, my number 5. Someone who, again, is suffering same thing as Tim Burton. Great early films. Someone who sparked my interest in cinema. Science fiction. Godfather of science fiction films. It's James Cameron.
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
I really hate Avatar. I really do. And that's a funny thing for putting James Cameron on my list. I mean, yeah, sure, it was cool to look at, but it was a story that we'd seen 5 million times. And,
it's like Pocahontas in Super HD.
And everyone said that, and it's something that's been gone over, but Jesus, I cannot get over the first time I watched Terminator 2. The first time I watched Aliens.
And I've seen both those movies. Didn't really, affect me one way or the other. But Avatar blew my pants off the first time I saw it. And now when I watch it, it feels something of a parody. But man, I don't know if you got to see Avatar IMAX 3D on, the giant screen, but it's if not for Avatar, this 3D fad would have fallen out years and years before it actually
motion
did.
capture, dude.
Yeah, and it that was what James Cameron understands about film technology in itself should put him on any of these top director lists. You know?
Absolutely, he's done more for CG. I mean, he essentially invented CGI in modern films.
Right.
He was the first director to use it with The Abyss.
Right.
And he was the first director to have a full movie that depended entirely on the technology, Terminator 2.
Right.
And I'll still remember the first time I watched Terminator 2, whenever he, lowers himself into that molten metal, I couldn't help but crying. I remember the first time I saw it, thinking, wow, this kid, I know you're going to laugh at me, but this kid's never had a father before. This machine was the closest thing he ever had to someone that cared about him.
Right.
And to see him have to get rid of him, it's kind of like the scene in Old Yeller, like.
Okay, so
Also, True Lies.
Yes.
Great film.
Where do you stand on the Titanic issue?
I like it.
I'll go out and say
it's not my film. It's not my film or genre.
I'll come out and say it. In another life, I was a girl that was born in 1984, 1983, and in another life, I was a 13-year-old girl that saw Titanic over and over in 1997. That movie to me it's the romance of all romances. Gone with the Wind will be nothing, for here on out because of Titanic. And there's something to be said about music in movies, and I've never, maybe Lord of the Rings, but even then, there's never been a music and movie pairing like Titanic. James Horner's score with that, I mean, that movie's like 4 hours long. You know from the start the boat's going to crash, and you're riveted every freaking second.
That's true.
And
he used to just was such a great, tight storyteller.
Right.
I just really hope that comes back. Because great early stuff. Aliens, to me, is the best entry in the Alien universe.
I disagree, but I can understand you having that.
Yeah, I mean, Alien, original Ridley Scott one is great.
Right.
But it's second one's a completely different animal.
Right.
Second one's an action movie. First one's a horror movie. Like,
right.
Just, but it was so much fun. That movie is, again, you watch the director's cut of that movie is, 2.5, almost 3 hours long?
Right.
Again, exciting same thing about Terminator 2. 2.5 or more long,
Right.
But great pacing, great action movies, great sequences, and technology and shots, that stuff that was made in 86 and 91 still looks realistic today. Watching Terminator 2 that was made in 91, the first movie to really use computer animation, you can't tell that it's the first movie to really use computer animation.
Right. It looks like it's 10 years down the line. Yeah.
It really does. And maybe that's because, his kind of realistic goal, all right, well, the guy that I'm going to do all this computer animation is just going to be this blobby, metal, shiny guy. That's easy to do with computer animation. But he understands the technology and adjusts his story to fit the technology.
Right. Absolutely.
But anyway, so everyone loves James Cameron. I feel like we could talk about it forever.
James Cameron is the greatest pioneer. Yeah. So I will go on to my number 4 director. This is another one that was tough. He could have, maybe on a different week of my life or different day of my life, he's my number 1. It's funny because when I first saw his movies when I was in high school, I'd heard all this hype, and I didn't watch him till high school. And I really didn't like any of the stuff I'd seen by him. I didn't get it. I didn't really, it felt weird. It didn't feel normal. And that's Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah. On my honorable mention list, I gotta say.
I've heard all sorts of things about Pulp Fiction, and I watched it once, and I was like, this is not good. This is not a good movie.
Yeah.
And then I watched it again, and I was like, this is kind of a cool movie. There's parts that I don't like, but this is kind of cool. And then I watched it again, and again, and again.
And then it's cinema genius. It's a masterpiece.
Right. And I think, it requires the rewatching because it essentially is a film deconstructed. It's not going to watch in one take like an old school normal linear movie does. It's this new kind of new wave deconstructed version of a murder story or a detective story, and it's same with Reservoir Dogs. Oh my God, what a film!
Yeah,
Reservoir Dogs. Holy shit, what a film!
And what dialogue?
Yes, and that's something that I just appreciate the hell out of Tarantino for is. That man knows how to make dialogue.
Oh, incredible. I mean, Tarantino's films aren't really my cup of tea.
Right.
But I appreciate them like no other. I mean, I really do. His dialogue is fantastic. His pacing is awesome. His cinematography is incredible. His work with his actors, he gets everything out of everyone he works with.
And the music choices.
I mean, yeah, there's nothing about his films that you can point to and say, hey, he doesn't do this well. There is nothing you can point. Well, I don't know. Is there something that you could point to?
Oh, that's a good question. Maybe the fact that other than Jackie Brown and Kill Bill, all of his movies are all just super dude oriented, I guess. Well, no, not totally. You have Shoshana and Inglourious Bastards.
But no, you're right. They do skew towards kind of.
They're overly dude feeling. They're very just IMDb type material, if that makes sense.
That makes 100%. We've talked about this a lot. The way
I don't know if that's a legitimate or articulate criticism, but there is this sense that it's only a guy can appreciate Tarantino, or
because he goes places that other people think are uncouth.
Right. And it's always some kind of crime oriented, and it's always off the beaten path, and it's usually very much an exploration of masculinity.
But then again, the off the beaten path aspect is why it's so intriguing.
Right.
I mean, anyway, any other kind of thoughts on Tarantino? I mean, this is a no-brainer to me.
I can't wait for the Hateful Eight to come out. I don't know what to really expect out of it, but the cast sounds awesome, and holy shit, Django was such an incredible film. Django really just blew me away, and it still continues to blow me away, and I just feel like he's one that has just gotten better and better. He really hasn't made a bad film yet. You
really do feel his growth as an artist, though, kind of with each film.
Right.
Even though his early stuff, I mean, Pulp Fiction is probably one of his earliest.
No, Reservoir Dogs is, and that's maybe his best movie, so.
Yeah, I mean, whereas I do feel like he's growing with every movie, he still started in a great place. But I feel like his understanding of how to run these movies, how to film them, how to shoot them.
Well, and the other thing, I think part of that is that some of these early prodigy types, especially with these indie prodigy guys, they make badass movies, maybe their rookie movie or their sophomore movie, but then after that they just kind of fizzle out into nothing, a la Kevin Smith or even Robert Rodriguez.
Oh God!
And it's like I think a lot of people expected that out of Tarantino, and maybe we're kind of worried that was happening. Hey,
we're talking about best directors. Please don't bring up Rodriguez again. Please don't.
Right. But both Kevin Smith and him, all they all had early good movies, and then they just fizzled out. And Tarantino just never fizzled out. There were maybe signs of it with Kill Bill and Jackie Brown, but even then, they were great. Genre pieces. So.
Yeah, and I feel like every time he's expanding the genres that he's doing while maintaining his style and his certain aesthetic that works really well.
Right. So, why don't you mention your fourth?
Okay, so this one is, I'm sure no one's going to know this one. This is my wild card. It's Francis Weber. He is a French filmmaker. There's a couple movies that have been remade here in the U.S. of his. The Dîner de Con, The Dinner Game. He only has he has a couple movies, early movies.
For those that don't know, The Dinner Game was remade into Dinner for Schmucks or Dinner with Schmucks with Paul
which is an awful movie. Awful movie.
Well, but I mean, it was such a good idea and such a well-made French film that Hollywood thought they could get away with just packaging it as shit, and they essentially did.
They completely changed the storyline, and they just
But nobody in America knows that, and you know, the original idea was so strong that they were able to just package it into a successful movie.
So anyway, if you ever want to get into him, every movie that he has made since The Dinner Game, which came out in '98, has been fantastic. I mean, every single one of them.
Are they all comedies?
They're all comedies.
Okay.
But really well written, genius, intelligent comedies, not just your regular comedies. He does kind of have his own tropes. Like in most of his films, his main character's name is Francois Pignon. In almost all of his films.
Are they all starring the same actor?
No.
Okay.
But anyway, just quick rundown, because this is just so out there, then I'm not, going to go way too in it.
Right.
But Dinner Game, incredible. It's about this guy, they invite idiots to dinner. Who has the biggest idiot? Hilarious. But what's great about the French version is they never leave the apartment.
Right.
They never get to the dinner. It is just this entire back and forth. These two actors carry the entire. It's these two actors in this apartment.
It's essentially a play, right?
Huh?
It's essentially a play.
Yeah, it very much is essentially a play. It's two guys in an apartment the whole movie, and it's genius.
And I can vouch for you on this one. You made me sit down and watch this with you, and I found this one absolutely hilarious. And I watched the whole thing subtitled.
Well, good, because there's really more. Because I mean, Dinner Game's great. The Closet, great. Stars one of my favorite French actors of all time, or my two favorite French actors of all time. It's about a guy who doesn't only lose his job at a condom factory, so he pretends to come out of the closet so he can't get fired. Really funny. Ruby and Quentin is a great little film about an idiot and like an assassin or like a capable thief or whatever, I forget what to say. And they break out of jail and they go on this big romp and the idiot annoys him, and it is something that you've seen over and over again, but it is so well done and it is so funny. And you have the godfather of modern French cinema, Gerard Depardieu, playing the idiot, and it is just genius.
Right.
Again, The Valet, about a guy who gets shot. I mean, all of his movies have such great, storylines. Valet is about a guy who gets shot, by the paparazzi. He's this billionaire, and he's shot with his supermodel mistress and this random valet, and he tries to create this elaborate story that the valet is dating the supermodel mistress, not him, and it is just so funny. Pain in the ass about an assassin who is trying to kill this one guy, but the guy in the room next door, she keeps trying to commit suicide.
Okay.
Again, entire movie, two people in, conjoined hotel rooms.
Right.
The entire thing is in two conjoined hotel rooms.
Essentially a play, right?
Yeah, and I'm telling you, those movies are genius. If you haven't seen them, watch one or all of them. They're really funny.
Right.
Anyway. That's Francis Weber. Well, that's it for today. Thank you all for listening. We will continue this list tomorrow with our top threes and our honorable mentions. This was Fan and Critic News. Goodbye.